right, 3.5 is called equations of lines. And this is a really important section. It kind of ties together everything you've learned. And there's test questions all over the midterm, the final, every test from now to the end from this section. So let's just review the equations of the lines that we know. We know this one, y equals mx plus b. And that is called slope-intercept form. We just used that. Let's name that for our notes. And we know the slope formula, it says that you take the rise over the run. And I'll put a subscript there so we know that we keep the lines, the points, in the right order. And then, if I took this equation and I multiplied both sides by x subtract x, well, right here it would cancel. And then I'm just going to flip-flop it for you. I'm going to put the y's first, and then I'm going to put the slope times the x's. Well, believe it or not, that equation that's just one step away from the slope is called point-slope form. And some people like that formula when they're given a point and a slope. So we have this formula, this equation, and we have this equation. And they're both very useful. And of course, don't forget your slope formula for this section. So they're going to tell you, they're going to give you some questions, and then you're going to have to find the line. So first of all, they'll all start out, write the equation. So I'll abbreviate equation. Write the equation of the line. And our first one says, with slope -1 and y-intercept 0, 3. So what you might notice is that, oh look, they gave me the slope, and both of those require the slope. But they also gave me the y-intercept. That I know it's the y-intercept because the x is 0. That's where it crosses the y-axis. So that's b. So we're given b and we're given m, so that is an equation of a line. Now remember, in an equation of a line, you want y and x to be y and x. You don't want to substitute those, or you no longer have an equation. You just have a list of numbers. Y and x change as the points on the line change. So you don't want m and you don't want b, and here, the ones with subscripts are specific numbers. But this y and this x, you want to leave y and x. So let's go ahead and plug that into slope-intercept form. So I would write y equals, and then m is what they tell me the slope is, -1, x plus b, and we know that the y-intercept is 3. And you would probably see that like this, because we know -1 times x is -x. But you're done. That's the equation of the line. One other possibility is that they could add x to both sides and write the equation like that. That's one more equation, and that's called general form of a line. That's if they put whatever's in front of x and x plus whatever's in front of y and y equals to the constant. That's general form. So depending on which one they want, you can just switch the order really easily. Just bring the x and the y to the same side like we did, and then you have general form or you have slope-intercept form, whichever one they want. Let's try another one. How about this one? Let's write the equation of the line with a slope of -2 that contains the point 3, -4. Now that's really similar. We're given a slope in both of those, but the difference is this one is specifically the y-intercept because the x value is 0. But this one is just a random point on the line somewhere. It is not where it crosses the y-axis. So I don't have b. So there's two ways to do this. You can actually plug in x, y, and m right here for x, y, and m and solve for b, or you can use point-slope form because we are given a point and a slope. So let's do it both ways. Suppose I use point-slope form first. I would say y subtract, and y sub 1 means I want a specific value, so my specific value for y is -4 equals m, which is negative 2, times x, subtract a specific x value, which is 3. It has to coordinate with this one. And that's it. Then we just simplify. We know subtracting a negative is adding. And be careful when you distribute to distribute the negative all the way through. And if they want general form, we would get x and y on the same side. If they want slope-intercept form, we'll solve for y. And I think that's what they'll want. So I subtract 4 from both sides, and I get y equals negative 2x plus 2. Now let's suppose we wanted to do that the other way. Let's suppose that we don't have this formula memorized, but we know this one. So we're going to plug in, again, y and m and x and find b. So if I plug in y, I have negative 4. And then I plug in m, I have negative 2. And then I plug in x, which is 3. And that gives me everything but b, so I can solve for b. So multiplying, we get negative 6 plus b. And then to get b alone, we'll just add 6 to both sides. So if I add 6 to both sides, b equals 2. So notice now you have b, and you were given m at the very beginning. So it's kind of now like this problem. You have the slope and you have the y-intercept. So you can just plug them in. Y equals the slope, negative 2x, plus the y-intercept, which is b. Let's try another one. What if they said, write the equation of the line through, and they just give you 2 points. Now, you're not given, in both of the previous problems, look at those, I'll let you glance at those. In both of the previous problems, we were given the slope. So, this equation is different because we're given 2 points, but no slope. But we know the slope formula, right? I'll hurry and write that down. So, since we have that memorized, we can find the slope. So we'll just find it ourselves. So I know it's y minus y. So I'm going to say 4 subtract 0. And then remember, if you use 4 first on the top, you have to use negative 2 first on the bottom to keep that slope correct. So our slope is negative 4/5. And also, right here, let me point out that that is equivalent to this. And in my math lab, you'll probably see that negative right smack dab in the middle. And we know those are all the same number, right? So now I have a slope and a point, just like my last problem. But I have 2 points. But guess what? You just use one of them. And I'm going to pick this one because it looks a little easier with that 0 in it. And this one has a negative. Sometimes those cause mistakes. So I'm going to use my 3, 0. I'm going to use this point, and I'm going to use this slope that I just found. Let's use this formula. And I kind of like point slope form better, but it seems like most of my students like slope intercept form better. So I'll do it this way this time. So if I'm using this equation, I'm going to plug in my y, which is 0, and my slope, which is negative 4/5, and my x, which is 3. And that gives me everything I need to find b. So that's convenient, that's 0. Right here, we know when we multiply fractions, we just go top times the top and bottom times the bottom. And keep in mind, when nothing's there, it's a 1. So 5 times 1 is still 5. And then, to get b alone, I'll add 12/5 to both sides. So, I now have b, and I found m. So I have m right here, and I have b right here, so I can plug it into my formula right here. So I have y, remember that you want y and x to stay y and x. Y equals my slope, negative 4/5, x stays x, and then I plug in b, plus 12/5. Okay? Alright, let's try another one. How about this one? Write the equation of a vertical line containing this point. Now, I'll tell you, I drill my students on questions like this. And one time, this exact type of problem was on the final. I can't remember if it was vertical or horizontal. But this problem is actually so easy that I probably took it for granted. And now I make sure I teach it. So let's talk about it. You could try and plug it into your formula, either your slope-intercept or your point-slope form. But I think this is even easier just to think it through. For example, if I had an xy plane and I had this point, -1, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's the point. And it tells us it's vertical. So it goes like this. And I had to name that line. We should be able to name it. A vertical line only has an x. And a horizontal line only has a y. And they're named for where they hit the axis. So since this hits the axis at -1, that name is x equals, because it crosses the x-axis, at -1. Done. In fact, let's do a horizontal one, just to make sure we're straight. Find the equation of, let's pretend they said a horizontal line. And let's say it contains 3, -5. So, drawing that, I'm going to go over 3, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's that point. And this one says it's horizontal. So, it looks like this. Now, it crosses the y-axis. So, it's y equals. It's wherever it crosses the axis. And it crosses the axis at -5. So that equation, we are done. We have the equation of the line. If they ask for a vertical or horizontal line, that's all you have to do is just think it through, and it's really fast. Alright, now this one is probably the most likely test question that you'll see. And it says, write the equation of the line through, so it tells us a point that it goes through, 3, 4, and then instead of giving us the slope, it says it's perpendicular to this line. So they give us a point like the first problems that we've seen, but they don't give us a slope. They just tell us it's perpendicular to this. But guess what? That is a way to tell you the slope in disguise. Because if you know this slope, you know that our slope is the opposite reciprocal, or the negative reciprocal, or the negative inverse. So let's go ahead and find this slope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So it's gone on the left and it's now on the right. And then I'm going to divide everything by 4. And I'll go one more step and reduce. So, from this, we did all of that just so we could see the slope. So, can you tell me the slope of this line? Hopefully you know it's whatever's in front of x, -1/2. So, if they had said parallel, we know we would use the same slope. But, because it's perpendicular, we need to flip it and change the sign. So, the slope of a perpendicular line is +2, or 2/1, which we know is just 2. So we did all of that. We now have the slope and we have a point. So we can plug it into our formula. So here we go. Y equals mx plus b. Plugging it in to find b. So I'm going to plug in y, which is 4. M, which is 2. X, which is 3. And I will use all of that to find b. So 4 equals 6 plus b. So we'll subtract 6 from both sides, and we get -2. Now that you have the y-intercept and you have the slope, you can write your equation. I go y equals my slope times x plus the y-intercept. And you can say plus -2 or subtract 2. Those are equivalent. And that is your answer. That's your equation of your line. This is a super important question. I have a list on the bottom of my notes of questions from final exams that have come from this exact section. So do every problem religiously, and good luck.